Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Comic Conversation. We got a lot to talk about today, so let's go! Alright, first up we got Batman Superman number 17 by Greg Pak and Adrian Saif. I got recommended to check out this book. I've been seeing it mentioned a lot in different comic book pages that I frequent. A lot of talk about Adrian Saif's artwork, a lot of comparisons to Jim Lee and even Jason Fabok. I found it a little bit more Jim Lee-ish. But I haven't been reading this series since the first arc. I went to check this out. This issue 17 is a continuation of 16, in which characters are just getting shot. People that Superman has saved in the past are getting taken out by some dude who has high-powered artillery, including Lex Luthor. Really great scene with Lex Luthor here where he gets shot and Superman sort of swoops in and saves the day and rips apart his armor to save him, and then they start blaming each other as to who the culprit is for the shootings. Lex Luthor gets into this whole thing about how the world's financial economy system would collapse or go into a Great Depression if he were killed. Classic Luthor lines there. Great writing by Pak, and I like Saif's artwork. We also get some other visuals of Hector Hammond, another baddie, usually a Green Lantern guy. They go to visit him for a little bit of help to try to track down this actual killer. Sort of ends in a cliffhanger that crosses over into the next book I want to talk about, Lobo number 4. So, we'll get into that before I give you what my final cape rating is of this book. Okay, so Lobo number 4 by Cullen Bunn, and too many artists to actually name. They've got 4 artists on this friggin' book. I don't know what that's all about, but it's been a trend since the New 52 started, especially on the second tier books. I don't know how many artists it takes to create a New 52 book. You could probably make a joke out of that somewhere. But the artwork here, it's not terrible, but it's not great. That certainly doesn't, I don't see why they needed 4 artists to do it. It's a little cartoony, especially for a book like Lobo, which I would expect to be a little bit grittier. Again, this story is a continuation of the Superman-Batman story we just mentioned. And in the beginning of this, Superman is sort of going back and forth with Lobo because he originally thought that Lobo might be the culprit who was going around shooting all these people that Superman had saved. They get into a brief confrontation, but they decide they're going to work together. I can't really get a read on who Lobo of the New 52 is. I have to be honest here, I did go into this a little bit, I was a little bit biased. I don't like the way the New 52 Lobo looks. He went from an intergalactic badass biker look to this rockabilly bullshit. And he's got this weird blue stuff on his face that I still can't figure out. I also am not a fan of the entourage he has with him in this book. He's got like a kid in there. It just doesn't make sense for the type of character that I think Lobo's supposed to be. And I'm just really confused by the character overall. I'm also confused by the fact that Batman completely disappears in this book. This book spun out of Batman Superman, and Batman is completely gone. And I think a confrontation between Batman and Lobo is something that people would be interested in. Cullen Bunn's writing is pretty good, though. I gotta admit, I've read some of his other work, including the Sinestro series he's got going on. And I think he's the only thing that sort of keeps this story moving. And it does a pretty good job of picking up on other aspects of that Superman-Batman story. But overall, just not impressed. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this one 2.5 capes. Could have gone lower, but Cullen Bunn kind of saved the day on certain aspects. The first book we reviewed, Batman Superman 17, I'm gonna go ahead and give that one 4 capes. I'll be back next month to check out that book, not Lobo.
Boo, Lobo, you Lobo.
Next up, Ant-Man number 1 by Nick Spencer and Raymond Rosanas. Ant-Man's a character that's been in the press a lot lately because he's got a movie coming out this summer starring Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas, actually. And so with that teaser trailer that Marvel just released recently, they went out and put Ant-Man number 1 to coincide with that, I guess, to hype up the press surrounding the movie. And I gotta tell you, I was blown away by this book. It was really awesome. Very unexpected, delightful surprise here. The book stars Scott Lang's version of the character, not the Hank Pym version of Ant-Man. And he's sort of a lowly superhero. He's died before. He's flat friggin' broke. He's having custody battles with his ex-wife to see his daughter, who used to be a superhero herself and also died herself. They don't really explain too much about that, which was sort of a weird thing. But that's sort of the feel of the book. He's a broke superhero. He's trying to make money so that he can keep up visitation rights with his daughter and get his life going back on the right track. So what does he do? He applies for a job at Stark Technology to be Tony Stark's head of security. Now, let's just remember that this isn't the Tony Stark that we know, Tony Stark Iron Man. This is Tony Stark Superior Iron Man. And Superior Iron Man is still a superior dickhead. And Stark pits Scott Lang against a few other different younger superheroes in a battle to become his chief of security. There's a lot of interesting twists and turns, and I just really like this book. The artwork was awesome. It was real simple and straightforward, but it worked great for a book like this. It looked a lot more like an independent comic book. And the writing was great. It's a $4.99 book. We've talked about those in previous episodes. But you get a lot out of it, and you really don't want it to stop. I came really close to giving this book 5 capes. The book was solid throughout up until the last few pages. It takes a few twists and turns that completely change the direction that the storyline is going to go through for future issues. And it was super disappointing. Whereas I was almost 100% sure I was going to be back for next issue, by the time I actually finished it, I'm still going to probably be back because it was so exciting. But it would have been so cooler if they went another direction. I'm not going to spoil it for you, so I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to talking about here, but you're going to have to go ahead and read it. But anyway, I'm going to give this book 4 3/4 capes, which I know is super friggin' petty, but there was something at the end there that just blew it for me. I would have been much happier if it went in a different direction.
You know what? You just blew my Photoshop on this. You know how hard it is to do these capes? Look, folks, they look cheesy, but they're not cheesy, man. I spent hours and hours to do the little lightning bolt.
I figured Founder was going to give me some shit for that.
Son of a bitch.
But anyway, that's the final verdict here. 4 3/4 capes.
I ain't Photoshopping that. It'll just be 4 4.5.
This episode's spotlight is on Guardians by Todd Black and Alex Garcia. Guardians follows the story of 2 superhero brothers sent to the fictional Delta City. The brothers, Chaos and Element, have really strong superpowers that have helped them pretty much annihilate most basic crimes within the originally crime-ridden Delta City. They're the saviors of the city, and they position themselves on this lighthouse, this perch, if you will, in the center of the city where they can sit around and watch all crime and just watch the entire city on a day-to-day basis. They're a little inhuman. They're sort of not one of us, and they're trying to learn how to be one of us, or at least Element is, while Chaos is just a little bit concerned with the mission at hand. But it's fun. It's a real traditional sort of superhero book. They face off against some cool villains, including this guy Tempest, who can control the wind, and then they run into this parkour villain who can run and jump over cars and get through anything, but I think he's got some more mystery powers besides that we're going to find out in later issues. I read issues 0 through 4 of this book, and I enjoyed it. It was a fun ride. I think there's still a lot more we're going to learn about these characters, including where they're really from, who this creator is that sent them. We'll probably learn more about the villains themselves. And the city seems to have a mysterious background. There's a backstory in one of the issues I read which talks about this Delta City, which just seems like your traditional fictional comic book city, but then now I'm thinking there might be a little bit more to that as well. Anyway, it's a fun read. If you want to know more, go to facebook.com/GuardiansComic. Alright, that does it for today's episode, but let's keep this conversation going, people. Follow us on Twitter @ComicOnvo. Go to facebook.com/comic conversation and like us there. And if you're an independent creator, you want to send us your book, send it to comicconversation@yahoo.com. Founder will take a look at it, and then he'll shoot it over to me, and I'll take a look at it and maybe even show it on the show. Alright folks, till next time.